that when you scale up these networks, so it's not just a little baby network with a couple thousand neurons, but it's actually a much bigger network with several 100,000 of them connected with like millions of weights and synapses, that actually these can do incredibly well, even on normal sized images, and achieve extremely good performance.
This video will explain at a beginner level what a neural net is, how Tesla is using them to solve full self-driving, and why Tesla's Dojo computer is a big deal. Understanding neural nets and Tesla's lead in them is very important, as it could mean massive returns for your portfolio. I really believe Tesla will be the world's largest company because of their neural net training, which will solve robotaxi level full self-driving. So let's dive into the details. If you're new here, welcome to the channel, The Paper Bag Investor, where we're always looking for the next multi-bagger investment. We're trying to find really premium, excellent companies that we can be sure are going to have a high growth rate, a high return over a long span of time. Using this approach, I've been investing since about 2009. I've returned about a 30% compound annual growth rate over that time. And I hope that this channel, my channel, can help you return similar returns over the next 10 years. I really get excited about seeing people's eyes open up to the world of investing and really looking deeply at the business they're buying, the actual details of the business. If you look at a business that way, you could really, I think, have phenomenal returns. So if that all interests you, I encourage you, hit that subscribe button down below, follow along, and join my channel. I also have just decided that once I get to 10,000 subscribers, I will do a face reveal and take this mask off. So please, for nothing else, hit that subscribe button so I can get this mask off my face. Okay, and please, while you're at it, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. Okay, so Tesla's Dojo and neural nets explained for beginners. If you really don't understand what a neural net is or where Dojo's place is in that, this is gonna break that down for you. Okay, so first of all, what problem is Tesla solving with full self-driving? Full self-driving, they're trying to make a car that can drive 10 times safer than a human driver in any scenario, right? But let's go deeper in describing that problem. Let's try and describe that problem at a deeper level. What problem is Tesla solving? They're really trying to solve a system that can perceive the entire world visually and then can plan and act accordingly in that world. That's really what they're trying to do at a more fundamental level. So how would one solve a problem like this? How would you do that? The planning and acting part of that problem is actually not so difficult if the car can accurately perceive the world. If you think about it, if a car can accurately perceive all the details of the world around it as it's driving, then you can traditionally program that car to follow the path it's driving on, get to the destination safely, not hit the pedestrians, stop for them because they know they're pedestrians, not hit other cars, yield to cars that are coming aggressively, things like that. It can make all those decisions relatively easily if it can actually perceive the entire world. But this perception part, trying to perceive the whole world correctly, is much more difficult for a computer to do. If you think of a digital image of, say, a stop sign, at the smallest level, it's broken down into individual pixels with individual colors. So imagine trying to write a software program to make a computer know that some set of pixels and colors in a picture represent a stop sign. How would you really do that? It's quite difficult to do. And there's two approaches to solving that perception problem. One, if you tried to do that with traditional coding, that would be the first approach, is you try and write code from start to finish directly to perceive all objects. In this example, a stop sign. And traditional coding requires you manually have to tweak, manage all the lines of code, improve and expand on the perception abilities of the system for every little nuance that might be out there. Maybe it's a rusted stop sign. You have to figure out what that is. Every type of stop sign, maybe a stop sign that's bent backwards at a weird angle. You can only sort of see it in a certain plane because it got bent by the wind or something. Every scenario, you'd have to manually program that in. And for a full self-driving car, given given all the things it has to perceive and all the nuance of the world, this is virtually impossible to do. The world's much too complicated to manually write out a script that could do that. So the second approach is what is actually done to perception, and that is neural net training. So this is where you dive into what is a neural net. A neural net is not where you don't write code itself, but instead you create a network that attempts to perceive objects, then give the system feedback. Then you feed feedback into the system after it's attempted to identify, say, a stop sign. Neural net approach is much more focused on the system framework. How's that framework set up? And the feedback it is fed. For example, whether something actually is a stop sign or not, rather than precisely coding out what the stop sign, how to identify a stop sign, like we were mentioning. And over time, if you give it enough data into this system, this structure, this network, and by data, in this case, I would mean images of stop signs. If it's fed enough data and given feedback, like it's told, this is a stop sign, and this one, no, that's not a stop sign, it's given correction, the neural net is trained and becomes better and better at identifying stop signs. If you tried to write that out as traditional code, it'd be like millions of lines of code that evaluated each pixel of the image, and if it could identify, an octagon shape that was red with enough red pixels and an STOP in white in the center, it might determine this is probably a stop sign. But again, that's super hard to do, nearly impossible to actually write out. But that's kind of what the neural net is building in its own brain, in itself, automatically, as the structure is fed data, and then as the data is corrected. Yep, you're right. No, you're wrong. So if we jump back to our original question, what problem is Tesla solving? It's this perception problem is the main problem, and then you have to plan and act accordingly in the world. So if you are to ask again, to perceive the entire driving world, what do you need to do? You need to create a neural net for perception, collect lots and lots of data, because every little thing you need to perceive, you need to undersee it in all different conditions, lighting conditions, angles, etc. So lots and lots of data. Process all the data by the neural net, and then label and correct perceived objects. So all the different objects you have to label and correct what's right, what's wrong from the network. And then repeat steps 2 to 4. Just keep repeating these over and over again until the perception is highly accurate for everything you need to perceive. That's all you got to do. I say all you got to do, but it's a very difficult problem, but that really is all you have to do. And then you could create a car that could perceive the whole world. And in Tesla's case, really, they're doing all of these things. They have a neural net that's leading in this area. They have all the data from their fleet of vehicles, ever expanding, growing fleet of vehicles that can collect all the data they need to process. Then they can process the data by the neural net. They have a supercomputer right now that can process this data and then label and correct. They have an in-house team of individuals that label data manually, but then lots of data. They're creating systems that can automatically run through and label data correctly, and then with less and less manual intervention, and then they can just keep repeating this. Right now, they're repeating this every 2 weeks or so. They put out a new full self-driving beta version, but this is where Dojo comes in, because this processing time is actually a significant chunk of time just to literally compute all the information that needs to be filtered through the neural net system and figured out all those little tweakings of the decision making. Is this a stop sign? Is this not a stop sign? All that little tweaking and processing of the data literally takes time for a supercomputer to do. And so right now that can take 1 to 2 weeks for that processing. But with their Tesla's Dojo computer, this is going to be coming out hopefully next year, that the processing time could be shrunk down significantly. Maybe you're not talking 1 to 2 weeks. Maybe they can do a software update in 1 to 2 days. That's kind of the jump we're talking about, which could mean significant improvements. You see some issue with full self-driving, make a correction, process it, correct the data where possible, and then push out a new update again, and then see where it's lacking. So really, really important that Dojo computer will accelerate the learning rate of this iterative loop. But the question really, if you're as an investor, you might be thinking, okay, that's all cool, neural nets, we get it, but what's the end result if Tesla continues pushing this iterative cycle? What's going to happen? It's Tesla will solve driving perception. They will solve the perception of the car and can accurately perceive the world around it. And what will happen if Tesla solves driving perception? You guessed it, Tesla will solve full self-driving. To me, that's a fact. They'll have cars that can drive 10 times safer than humans. Regulators eventually and the public at large, I think, will demand that most people drive, robo-taxis most of the time in most cases. So, and what will happen if Tesla solves full self-driving? Tesla stock is going to go to the moon. To me, that's a fact as well. Okay, this is from a video I did July 10th of this year where I looked at Tesla's robo-taxi valuation. So we're going to run through this and to show you why I think Tesla will be the world's biggest company because of this neural net training that they have, because they have all the aspects in place in the iterative loop that's accelerating, or will be accelerating to make the full self-driving software even better and better. So here it is. Okay, if they do if their vehicle deliveries grow at 40% annual growth, compound annual growth rate in vehicles from 2020 to 2030. And they did 500,000 vehicles last year. That'd be 14.5 million vehicles by 2030. That's kind of my baseline. They're actually shooting for more like 20 million per year by 2030, but I'm going to be a little conservative here. And if you go 2020, 2030, you add up all those vehicles, you include all of them. You ignore vehicles before 2020. I know there'd be some there as well, but ignore those. You'd have about 50 million vehicles in existence. And of course, every year you're going to have 15 million, 20 million more added to that fleet, but we're just looking at 2030 in this case. And you assume 20% are used as robotaxis full time. So maybe some are, obviously some are going to be part time, some full time, but assume 20%, 1/5 are full time robotaxis. To me, that's again probably low. If they do have robotaxis solved, it could be even higher. And then you have like 10 million robotaxis in the fleet. So. And each robotaxi, if you do 100,000 miles per year, or 50,000 billable miles per year on that vehicle. So we're assuming 50% of miles are not billable, which I think is a little bit conservative again. I've looked at some studies on this that you'd actually, based on how much you actually are driving, depending on the number of robotaxis in the network, you probably are going to actually have more billable hours than not billable hours. That's beside the point. Or billable miles, I should say. And then if you charge $1.25 for billable mile, I think this might be a reasonable rate of cost where it starts at. Then this could decline over time as robotaxis become more and more ubiquitous. Then you'd have about 62,000 in revenue, and if you assume 55 cents per billable mile, which is, I've done some other videos, is my calculations on kind of owning a robotaxi cost, that could probably even be pushed down at certain economies of scale even further, but for this, that's what I'm including. 28,000 in expenses. You have a net profit of $34,000 per robotaxi. And just of its operating there. Now assume 20,000 goes to the vehicle owner, so maybe $20,000 goes to them, and then $14,000 to Tesla. And so that's kind of obviously that split could be balanced out depending how motivated they want to make vehicle owners or robotaxi operators operate their taxis, but that's a good, I think, a balanced assumption in this case. And then a robotaxi operating profit, you'd have about $140 billion at the operating level for robotaxis, 10 million and times by 14,000 per taxi to Tesla. And you assume 21% tax rate, and that gives a net tax of, or a net profit after tax of $110 billion. You put a PE of 50 to that, which I think is actually going to be very conservative, even at this point, because there's so many vehicles in the world that they're going to be continuing to adding their fleet to. Maybe they're going to license out their software and cameras to other vehicle makers that could rapidly expand the number of robotaxis. I think 50, given these numbers, is pretty conservative. It could be like 200 PE, honestly, but we're gonna say 50. It just and to the net profit of gives a 5.5 trillion market cap from robotaxi. Added to the vehicle side of the market, which I did in that video, I'm not going to detail here, is like 2.7 trillion is kind of my estimate. Just on the vehicle sales themselves, gives about 8.2 trillion market cap in 2030. And to me, this is pretty conservative. Easily could be 9-10 trillion plus, and even far beyond that for Tesla. Doesn't include other aspects like battery storage, energy generation through solar. So I think relatively conservative. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I actually have one more thing to share with you guys. Subscribe, because it's in the bag. And remember to hit that like button down below. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.